Hello, dears. This is a second session based on your English textbook, First Flight. The session is based on the chapter 2, an extract taken from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. This chapter is an extract from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, who was born on 18th July 1918, the first black president of South Africa. Excerpts from Long Walk to Freedom include description of the inauguration ceremony, citations from his speech, his journey to being a freedom fighter, the struggle, along with a tribute to other freedom fighters and countless other people who fought for their freedom. In South Africa, a brutal practice named apartheid was followed. Apartheid refers to the discrimination between people on the basis of their race. It was one of the most brutal societies where dark-skinned people were deprived of their basic rights. This lesson gives us an overview as to how Nelson Mandela, along with others, carved their way to a society where there will be no discrimination on the basis of their color, caste, race, age, or gender. Going to the summary of the lesson, this chapter is an extract from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela, the first black president of South Africa. It begins with the description of their inaugural ceremony, which took place on the 10th of May 1994, where the entire nation, along with many international leaders, embraced the victory of a newly and fairly elected government. It involved speeches by the president and the two deputy presidents, followed by an impressive air show of fighter jets and helicopters. Long ago, in the first decade of the 20th century, white supremacy introduced the system of apartheid and made life a living hell for the dark-skinned population. It gave rise to one of the most inhuman societies of the world. Many people have struggled and sacrificed for basic human rights. The author expressed his desire to thank all those freedom fighters who couldn't live to see this autumn day. He referred to the citizens as the greatest asset of the country. It is these people he gathered his courage from. Mandela believes that courageous is not the man who is fearless, but the man who has overcome fear. He also mentioned the two responsibilities every human has and how, in order to fulfill his obligation towards the society, his obligation towards his family was neglected. He became a man of people when he realized that the idea of freedom was an illusion for him and people like him. It was then he joined the African National Congress and fought for his rights till he became the first black president of the nation. According to him, the oppressor is as much a prisoner as the oppressed. As soon as the former robs the oppressed of their freedom, he himself gets robbed of his humanity. Thus, the oppressor too is not free. Coming to the explanation. 10th May was the day when Nelson Mandela sworn in as the first black head of state South Africa. It was after years of struggle that his anti-racist party came into power. Until then, the seat had always been occupied by white presidents. That is why the author referred to the day as bright and clear. It was a morning full of hope. Days before this date, Many notable personalities started congratulating him for his victory. For the first time in country's history, so many international leaders came together for their inauguration ceremony. The ceremony took place in an amphitheater, an open circular building made of sandstone consisting of union buildings in the Pretoria city. The author was accompanied by his daughter Zenani on his big day. First, the two vice presidents took an oath. Then, when his turn came, he committed to respect, protect, and abide by the Constitution and to devote his entire self into the welfare of the country. The author also mentions some parts of his speech where he said that everyone, by his presence, was giving rise to hope for a new beginning. Previous rulers were discriminatory and lasted for long, but the ones who are given the opportunity to rule now, that is the African National Congress, would stand up against discrimination. He is glad to host a ceremony with the presence of global leaders. It is an achievement in itself. There was a time when South Africa, for practicing apartheid, lost all its international political relationships. Now, when there is no segregation on the basis of race and gender, other nations are happy to have healthy democratic relationships. Finally, they have come to power and they pledge to make everyone proud. He thanked everyone, especially the international leaders, for joining them in celebrating their achievement, which is a step towards an equal society where every human will be treated fairly. He mentions that after great struggle, they have finally achieved political freedom. His government promised to free everyone of the still existing poverty, hardship, and inequalities of all kinds, along with assuring everyone of a country where no community will be considered inferior. He then exclaims that freedom should rule and may God shower his blessings on their land. Just after the newly elected president's address to the audience, an impressive arrangement of fighter jets, helicopters, and soldier transporters raised everyone's heads up in the sky. It symbolized perfection as well as military's respect and obedience towards the free country. The high commanders who have won medals for their bravery also saluted and promised their loyalty. Mandela mentions that he was well aware that these commanders, who were now saluting him, would have arrested him under the previous rule, as during the oppressive white supremacy he was considered to be a criminal. The air show finally ended by making of the South African flag in the sky from smoke beneath the jets. The author remembers the day as the playing of two national anthems of the country, one of the whites and the other that of the blacks. On that day, no one knew the wordings of the anthem of the blacks, but Mandela was confident that everyone would soon learn this anthem that they once hated. On the day of the inaugural ceremony, the author was remembering the days of past when this whole system of apartheid emerged. It resulted in inequality and inferior treatment of dark-skinned people. They were deprived of their basic fundamental rights. As a result, one of the world's most brutal and inhuman society was born. This began even before he was born. This system created an atmosphere of extreme cruelty and injustice for a particular part of the community. Now, when he is in his 8th decade as a man, he, along with countless others, have changed this entire system that treats humans as humans irrespective of their color, caste, gender, or age. This equal and free country was a result of sacrifices of countless other men and women who have fought all their lives for this day. The author wishes if he could thank them all, but unfortunately, they didn't live to see the result of their courage. Nelson Mandela gathered his courage and power from all these people and thus wishes to make them proud. The oppression policy scarred many people and it will take a long time for them to move on. The author mentions that this hard time had its negative impacts, but it also exposed a lot of strong and courageous men who stood up and raised their voice. Thus, it required that level of unjust treatment to produce such great heroes. South Africa, he says, is rich in minerals and gems, but its greatest strength lies in its people. Nelson Mandela gained his strength to stand against the wrong from all the great nationalists he mentioned above, who have even risked their lives for freedom and tolerated ill treatment, but never stopped fighting. He learned that courage didn't mean the absence of fear, but the ability to overcome fear. The man who overcomes his fear is called brave. One is taught by its society to hate humans because of their skin, color, age, gender, and religion. No one is inborn with hatred. The author's idea is that if people can be taught hatred, they can also be taught love and brotherhood. In their most testing times in prison, when they were being treated brutally, Mandela would see a pinch of humanity and kindness in one of the guards, and that was enough to keep him going. He believes that goodness in human beings can be suppressed but never eliminated. According to the author, every human being has its responsibility towards the family and as well as the society. Generally, under normal circumstances, a person can maintain the balance between the two, but in countries like South Africa, it was never so easy. When a person of color would come up for his society, he would be arrested and taken away from his family, thus keeping them from fulfilling both responsibilities. In the beginning, Mandela did not put his people over his family, but it was only later when he realized that in order to be there for his people, he was compromising his duties towards his own family. The author did not have the plan to stand against the apartheid system early in life. He lived his childhood like any normal child in South Africa. He only had to follow the rules set up by his father or the customs of his tribe. As soon as he grew up and began to learn the facts as to how people of color are treated, he decided to stand against it. He had this urge for freedom from inside, earlier just for himself, staying out at night, etc., and later for having a basic life, not just for himself but for everyone. In Johannesburg, they had to struggle for having a peaceful marriage, family, and basic amenities which everyone has access to where law and order exists. Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress when he realized it is not only him whose basic rights were snatched away, but of all those who looked like him. He had this fire inside him to free his people from the injustice. It was this fire that changed the author completely as a man, from being scared to brave, a lawyer to the one breaking the law, a family man to a man without a home, and a lively man into being a monk. It was the knowledge that he and his people have restricted freedom that made him into a selfless man as opposed to before. According to him, freedom cannot be divided. Snatching it away from some was equivalent to taking it away from everyone, and that meant taking it away from the author. He mentions that the need to free the oppressor is as high as that of the oppressed because the oppressor is bounded by the shackles of hatred. He has the weight of all the people who he has tormented, for he carries the curses of all of their families. For taking away someone else's freedom and making them a prisoner, he becomes a prisoner of biasness. Thus, he is robbed of his humanity and need to be freed. As a young boy and a student, Mandela's idea of freedom was to be able to stay out at night, read whatever he desired, and go wherever he chose. On growing up as a man, he realized that these were transitory freedoms he was looking for because their basic and honorable freedoms had been taken away. There was no liberty to have a peaceful marriage, family, and life. Dark-skinned people were deprived of their fundamental human rights. For them, freedom was an illusion. Depths of oppression create heights of character. Mandela illustrated this idea by the example of all those who had emerged as great freedom fighters after years of oppression and brutality. Though unintended, effect of all this was men with extraordinary courage and strength. One of the greatest examples is of our own country, where our people were exploited under British rule for about 200 years. As a result of oppression of such magnitude, India got freedom fighters like Bhagat Singh and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Mandela wanted to thank the generations before him who had fought for justice. He gathered his courage from these brave heroes, and it is because of that he fought fearlessly for what is right. Thus, he referred to himself as simply the sum of all those African patriots that had gone before him. Once Mandela realized his hunger for freedom, his life changed forever. It transformed him from a family man to a man of his people and a frightened young man into a bold one. He built his entire life around fighting for the basic fundamental rights for his community. He was more selfless and virtuous than ever. Thank you, dears. Now it's time for winding up. Before that, just note down the assignments. Assignment number 1. Read the chapter thoroughly and answer the given MCQ questions. Assignment number 2. Find the new words and meanings and write it in your notebook. Assignment number 3. Write the text back exercises in your notebook, including questions and answers. Thank you, dears. Stay safe, stay healthy.